Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's town hall. We are going to be talking today about going back to school and how that's going to work out with some incredible experts. I want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone for joining us on Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on Twitch. Everyone on Zoom, except for the speaker, will be muted. If you are on Zoom, you can chat into the chat box directly. And if you're on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, you can go ahead and type your comment or question into the comment section there, and we will have someone check it for you and make sure that we hear your question. Please be aware that the live video feeds will be a minute or two behind the Zoom video. And now we're going to get started. Our first guest is Kathy Rallings. Kathy Rallings has represented educators with the California Teachers Association and the California School Employees Association for over 25 years. In 2014, she was elected to the Carlsbad Unified School District Board of Trustees and continues to advocate for strong public education in California. Georgine Tomasi is joining us today. She is a history teacher and a union representative with the California Teachers Association. She currently serves as a school board member in the Escondido Unified School District. Kate Schwartz is with us as always, and Kate has served as a licensed behavioral health care professional for over 3 decades and has won election to serve as a director on the Fallbrook Regional Healthcare District Board. And she spent her entire career advocating for healthcare for all and owns a small business. And also during COVID has advocated for increased services for local communities. Kate is running for California State Assembly in the 75th Assembly District, which encompasses parts of San Diego's North County region and the southernmost reaches of the Inland Empire. Liz Lavertu is a mother, a volunteer, chair of the Spring Valley Community Planning Group, and she's been an active volunteer for over 20 years in her community. She is running for state assembly to advocate for working families, push for policies that will help shape our education, healthcare systems, and the environment. She's running for the 71st State Assembly District in East County, San Diego, Idlewild, Anza, Valley Vista, Sage, and more. Liam Amara is a history professor from a working-class family of union laborers. Liam has worked as a union longshoreman, a union fry cook, and a computer nerd. He later took on a lot of student debt to finish a PhD and has taught college for 12 years, focusing on the history of ideas. Liam is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress in the 42nd Congressional District in Southwest Riverside County. Now we're going to go ahead and get started with a couple of opening remarks from our first guest, Kathy Rallings.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. The title of this forum is Return to School, and I would say that that's the million-dollar question at this point. There's a lot of moving parts, and to be honest, it appears that the legislature and the governor's office are kind of like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. A big part of that is the state budget. The legislature did pass a budget on June 15th, as it's required to. However, the governor is not in agreement with that budget. In addition, there was a lot of questions that have not been answered. A big part of that is what is the liability of school districts if somebody does get sick with COVID, and if there are cases and if there's spread within the community. Also, there hasn't been any waivers for the 2021 school year, which is basically we need those to adapt to distance learning, hybrid models, and or independent study. Currently, through independent study, it is a completely different funding model. You're not funded through average daily attendance, you're funded through work completed, which can cause havoc within school district budgets. Currently, most school districts have created their 2021 budget based on a May revise, which is approximately a 10% cut. Currently, there are districts that have said that they cannot even complete the school year under these conditions with the current funds that they believe they have available. So my hope is that through our discussions that we can figure out how we are going to return to school. In addition, the staff, including teachers, how are we going to protect them and their safety? Some folks are saying, well, kids don't get COVID-19. However, they can infect people that might be at higher risk and could end up in the hospital, in ICU, and could bring that home to their parents and their elder relatives. So there's a lot of questions that I think still need to be answered. I think most teachers, employees of school districts, as well as students really want to get back to school and to be able to socialize and to have that environment. However, it needs to be done in a safe manner. And at this point, nobody can say if it's going to be safe or not. So those are my opening remarks, and I'm hoping we can have a robust discussion around this topic, and maybe we could solve some of the problems that we're looking at right now.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next, we're going to go to Georgine Tomasi, who will be joining us in just a little bit. So for now, we're going to be going to Kate Schwartz.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Okay, wanted to make sure before I started. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on our topic of education, the reopening, and the impact of COVID-19. My name is Kate Schwartz, and I currently serve on my Regional Health Board District as an elected trustee. I am currently also a candidate for Assembly District 75, which covers inland North San Diego County and Temecula communities. I've been a licensed behavioral health care practitioner for 3.5 decades, and during my career, I have served as a special education advocate as well, and I have coordinated mental health programs within school systems. I train graduate level trainees and postmaster's degree interns to become our behavioral health professionals of the future. I wanted to actually begin by acknowledging our 2020 graduates, because I know that in the last several weeks, many of our students, our high school seniors, have been graduating. And I wanted to take a moment to speak to them, to our graduating class of 2020. We are proud of you, and so should you be of yourselves. High school graduation reflects your accomplishment following 12 years of hard work, perseverance, as well as overcoming many challenges, as well as setbacks at times, as none of us are able to display strengths in every academic arena. Equally, there have been joys and friendships, and at times disappointments in this important aspect of your educational experience. And some may have had additional challenges and burdens as well to overcome, whether it be financial hardship, family stress, losses of family members or friends, fears of loss related to family's immigration status, or the need for multiple moves and multiple schools, among the many varied hardships over which you adapted, managed, and kept your eyes on the prize. Your community would like to honor all of you and the struggles you overcame to triumph in 2020. Congratulations. You deserved your graduation ceremonies, your grad night parties, senior breakfasts, and senior trips. And you deserve to be with your families and friends in celebration of this wonderful occasion. We feel your disappointment and hope that this fall some of you may have those postponed events to look forward to. Others are celebrating in new and varied ways today. And these celebrations are not the same, but they are in the desire to honor you and your achievement. And now that you have officially graduated from childhood, what does this world hold for you? You may also feel disappointed in this. An uprooted world in chaos and uncertainty awaits you. A world on the surface very different from just 6 months ago during your senior year. Your college or other postgraduate plans may be on hold or altered. It will definitely be a different way of starting your next phase. And the world has laid open its vulnerability, its wounds, its failings, and its dark side for us all to see. Today, nothing is hiding beneath the surface to be guessed at. You can plainly see the work that needs to be done to heal our nation and the world. Meaningful work awaits you on every front: public health, economic recovery, environmental work, and social and racial justice, which includes equal access to quality health care, to safe housing, to education without barriers, to meaningful jobs with living wages and benefits of paid sick leave, among the top priorities. Public safety and reversing the institutionalized systemic racism require our focused attention, commitment, and struggle to achieve. Yes, there is much to do, and your work will be vital to creating the lasting change and recovery this nation needs. And you are just the right generation for this task. Your generation is truly a diverse American generation. There probably will never be a more important time for young people to graduate and join the march to achieve lasting civil rights, true equality and freedom for all, economic, environmental, social, and racial justice. We welcome your voices, your hearts, and your abilities to overcome prejudice and tough challenges to create the world of our future that we all deserve. Your time is now. I wanted to make sure that we honored our graduates before we moved into our discussion of the reopening. I will save the remainder of my comments for our later discussion and allow the next speaker to go ahead at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We are really, really proud of all of our graduates for doing such incredible work through such adversity. If they can take this on, they can take on anything. They're literally taking on the world and doing such a great job already. So next we're going to go to Liz Lavertu.
Hi, everyone. Liz Lavertu, running for State Assembly in the 71st Assembly District, which is East County, San Diego, which the main, would be Spring Valley, El Cajon, Lakeside, Santee, Hamul, Jacumba, as well as everything that Tisa said earlier in the programming. So thank you, Tisa. 2021, school's gonna look a lot different. And I think that we, as activists, our current legislators, parents, and students need to understand that things aren't going to be exactly the same as they were before. We're going to have to compromise. We're going to have to look at different ways to ensure that our students get the best education possible, while also ensuring that we have safety in place. Right now, with the State Assembly looking at budgets for education, we need to talk to our State Assembly members and let them know that education already before COVID was already underfunded here in California, ranking in, the 40th out of 50, states for per student spending. But now each student is going to need a little bit more to ensure that we continue to see them grow and learn. They're going to need more funding to ensure that we can social distance in the classrooms, that all students have access to masks, that there are temperature check stations, accessible up for the school buses as well as at school, and extra hand sanitizing stations. If we look at what our current school budget is, we are already stretching everything and nickel and diming everything to ensure that, our kids can go to school for the year. But now we're gonna need extra funding to ensure that not only can they learn, but they can be safe as well. And I know there's a lot of parents in the area, especially in my district, who don't want their kids to go to school any different than in 2019-2020 school year. But things are different. And people say hindsight is 2020. Well, 2020, we actually get a little bit of hindsight because we're approximately, 4 to 6 months behind some of the other countries when it comes to COVID. So we can look, to our partners in China, to our partners in Israel, and look at what they're doing, to ensure that they have safety in the schools and what's working and not working. Right now, the two countries that I just mentioned actually are going on lockdown again and shutting down their education system because of the second wave of coronavirus is hitting. So we need to look and make sure that if we are getting a second or third wave in the fall, in the winter or even next spring before a vaccine is found, that we ensure that we have the safety protocols in place so that we don't have to shut down. I'll tell you, my son just got promoted from 8th grade. He's going to high school next year. Thursday was his drive-through promotion, which I'll be honest, for my student and for our family, it was way better than sitting on the lawn for hours and hours in the sun. We actually quite enjoyed driving through the school. We drove through the playground. All the teachers had signs, balloons, bubbles. There was a DJ playing music, and all the teachers were waving pom-poms, and the school mascot was there, and they're like, congratulations. And all the parents decorated the cars. It was a blast. And I'm like, this should be the way we do it all the time. We had so much fun. So, we have to embrace the changes, we have to embrace and just have fun with everything. But we also need to make sure that our kids are still learning. And once coronavirus hit and we went into distance learning, I'll be honest, my child does not learn well in distance learning. And I'm sure there's other parents out there that feel the same way. So I do want my child in the classroom, but I also want to make sure he's safe. So if we can make sure we're safe and we're following everything, we can keep the schools open, so that our students can learn. Now, in Cajon Valley School District, our school board, first of all, met in person, which was really entertaining. And there was probably over 60 parents there very concerned about what next year looks like. We need to be having conversations and being more transparent when we're making decisions. We need to be inclusive and including our teachers and our parents to help make these decisions. Now, there's some things that we're just going to have to do because we have to do them, but there's some things that we can do differently to make sure that everybody feels like their child's getting that education that they deserve. Trying to think. Okay. So one other thing that Kathy touched on just a second ago, and I just kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into this is, so when schools are looking at budgets, there's a different dollar amount that the schools get for kids who go to school versus kids who distance learn. So now with Cajon Valley, parents are going to have the choice whether their student is 100% distance learning in the 2021 school year, if they're going 50% to school, 50% distance learning, or 100% at school. So it is the parent's choice, which I think is great. It's that family, how that dynamic works, how that student learns, and what's best for the family. So it's great to have choices. But when it comes to funding, kids who distance learn at home, there's a lower dollar amount given to that student. Now, schools can't survive if there's 25% of their students are 100% distance learning, or even 50%. What does that look like? One day they get a certain amount and the other day they get another amount. So what they get 75% funding and they get 50% funding. So, there's a lot of conversations that need to be happening right now at the state assembly, which it sounds like they're having conversations, but they're not having solutions right now. So we really need to find the solutions to ensure that everybody can go back to school, that if a second wave comes, our students are safe, and to ensure that we can have an equity in education for everybody. We can definitely dive into those deeper. But for now, those are my thoughts, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Liam O'Mara.
Hello again, Liam O'Mara for the 42nd Congressional District. As most of us know, education is managed mostly by states and by individual districts, but there is a federal role both in providing funds and oversight, and I'd like to make a few brief comments about both. So I'll have less to say really about the process of reopening and more about how we needed a firmer hand from the federal government in actually managing these things in a way that puts the students first and does good rather than intentionally doing harm. And honestly, I think the federal government has completely lost its way with education. And this has been a long-running issue here. Favoring standardized tests, creating penalties that hurt poorer districts, and really what it could be doing is helping to improve quality and outcomes directly. And I'll tell you, as someone who routinely interacts with college students, many of them these days, especially from less well-off communities, are not well prepared to succeed. And a lot of that has to do with ways that we've been intentionally mismanaging things. Memorizing for bubble tests doesn't build a skill set that translates well to the real world. But if we focused a lot more on critical reasoning skills, teaching important disciplines like civics, economics, sociology, these things might help a lot with a lot of the social problems that we have today. And with much state and local funding tied to property taxes, impoverished communities are often really starved for resources. And you end up with then underpaid teachers, so it's difficult to attract and hold on to people. You end up with substandard equipment. You end up with unfinished buildings, these temporary trailers that go up for classrooms and then stay there for decades, not to mention the slashed arts and basic skills programs. What bugs me in terms of federal policy specifically is that much of our decline in our school systems nationally and internationally has been deliberate. It's the saddest part of the whole problem, really, because as we've been watching over the last several decades, there's been an intentional undermining of educational outcomes, especially of poorer kids, but affecting everyone in public schools. The reason is a far-right ideology suggesting that hierarchical control of society by the very rich is a desirable good. But unable to win over enough voters simply by saying their goal is oligarchic or neo-feudal, they couch it in a kind of like anti-government terms, and complaining, generally without any evidence, that government does nothing well and that private corporations should be given more and more power over our lives. One of the most brazen tactics in the toolkit there is something called regulatory capture. This means people who oppose the existence of a given government service are placed in charge of running it so that they can undermine and destroy it from the inside. The idea was first fleshed out in the 60s and 70s, first used to great effect under the Reagan administration, and it has been a part of standard GOP practice ever since, and infected even some aspects of Democratic administrations. Running a government department badly can be used as a gotcha moment, as a way to say, so you can say, see, look, government sucks. Let's let the private sector do it instead. And never mind that it was driven into the ground through intentional incompetence and sabotage. One of the more harmful areas to fall prey to such techniques has been education. A republic can only survive with an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. So the more you can erode our critical thinking skills, the more at risk we are overall. And education is one of the best ways to lessen generational effects of poverty. So the more you undermine it there, the easier it is to maintain control over marginalized communities. So if your goal is to increase poverty and maintain elite control, well, dismantling higher education and our secondary and primary education, these are great ways to do it. So enter billionaire Betsy DeVos, a person with no experience in public schools who now oversees the nation's education system. Her family has long worked to expand private for-profit education, which benefits only the well-off, and to weaken and eliminate public schools. Their sponsorship of charter schools and support for pro-privatization politicians has cut funding from schools across the country. After gaining her confirmation with the first tie-breaking vice presidential vote ever for a cabinet appointee, she has done her level best to drive our education system into the ground. So just for fun here, would you like a chronological greatest hits compilation? Strap in, this is a bumpy ride. She immediately rolled back protections for transgender students. She supported a 13.5% cut to department funding. She broke federal law by refusing to hold for-profit schools financially liable for fraud. She rescinded sexual assault guidelines and weakened protections under Title IX, and now requires cross-examination of rape victims by schools before anything can be done. She tried to strip collective bargaining rights from the Department of Education's employees. She backed a plan to use federal money to purchase guns and arm grade school teachers. She's approved only 0.5% of requests under a federal law offering student loan forgiveness for public sector workers. Her school safety commission responded to the Parkland shooting not by increasing the safety, but by stripping students of equal protection against discrimination. She worked to redirect $50 billion in taxpayer money to private for-profit schools. She opened the door to private religious schools receiving federal funding, breaking federal laws to do so. She slashed special education funding, saying, again, with no evidence, that they'll do better in larger classrooms with less services, and cut all support for the Special Olympics. Her 2019 back-to-school tour started at private religious schools. She blocked state and federal investigations of private lenders and schools that cheated students. If any of this made you angry, good. Cabinet-level posts are extremely powerful, and if we elect a government hoping to expand discrimination, weaken civil liberties, and shift resources from the poorest to the richest, it will have consequences. We need fully to fund our schools, and we need to ensure that teachers can focus on education, not on jumping through hoops. Americans deserve better, and that starts with our votes. So, thank you.
All right, everyone. So let's start with a question that I hear literally all the time now. And it's kind of an open-ended question, but it's an important one that we ask. So several of these plans that we're seeing under consideration now all start with the idea that it's with social distancing in classrooms, we're going to be able to just make them smaller, spread the kids out. So how does that actually work now, where teachers unions have been arguing for years for smaller class sizes? How can we realistically make this work? And is it a realistic plan? How serious is this actually?
So I'll start off with a partial answer is in our district where parents can choose if students go to 100% distance learning or 50% in classroom, 50% distance learning, that's going to take some of the kids out of the school population to be able to bring down the classroom size a little bit. But now, we need to start looking at how are the teachers teaching? How are the kids at home learning? Are all lessons being Zoomed? Is there equity in the education level between the students who are at school and the students who are at home? But that's one way, one way to bring down the class sizes a little bit. Now, ultimately, yes, we should have more funding to ensure that classroom sizes are smaller overall, regardless of a pandemic. The great thing, not that the pandemic's a great thing, it's a really bad thing, but there have been some benefits to it, like the benefit of figuring out how to give shelter to our homeless population. That was figured out very quickly with the pandemic when we didn't have the budget or the resources for it in the past. And again, now with education, hopefully we can build, a school system with lower class sizes, figure out the funding mechanisms there, and then going forward post-pandemic, continue with those to ensure that, the kids can learn better in the smaller classroom sizes.
I'll chime in on that as well. Just to be clear, teachers unions aren't the only ones that want to see smaller class sizes. I would suggest that that school boards definitely want to have smaller class sizes. We get our constituents want to see that a lot, and administrators are always trying to find ways to make that happen as well.
And the children are trying to learn.
Absolutely, the students want it, the parents want it, administrators and teachers unions and individual teachers want it, and it really boils down to money. I mean, that's really the aspect that you can't because you're funded per student. And across the board, if there's not enough money, if we're getting 10% cut, let's say, there's no way to fund having smaller class sizes. Now, in this pandemic, one of the things that has been discussed is do the distance learning model, hybrid models where students are only actually in the brick and mortar classrooms for 2 to 3 days a week. Another aspect has been discussed is that you have what would be called pull-out. So you would have a lot of outdoor learning spaces where maybe science would be taught outdoors. In Southern California, we could do that, utilizing multi-purpose rooms, utilizing auditoriums. So you're utilizing more of your campus for core subjects. That's a way to do it as well. But a big part of it, again, is going to be the funding. The school district that Liz is talking about, they do not have a state authorization to do a hybrid model, to do distance learning full-time. That has not been authorized yet by the state. So we do need some leadership at the state level and some clear regulations and clear waivers so school districts can actually plan in order to be able to do this stuff.
I'd like to step in for a moment and add some information. I've been reviewing the Department of Education guidance for California schools and the recent press conference by State Superintendent Tony Thurmond. And when they're talking about phase 3, California and the schools reopening, they're providing some suggestions and guidance, which I think will give us some room for discussion today on how this might occur. And in terms of the spacing and social distancing, they're looking at 4 scheduling options that will make it easier to space students out. One model is a 2-day rotation blended learning model. So an example is grades K through 3 attend school Monday, Wednesday, while grades 4, 6, Tuesday, Thursday, and all students do distance learning on Friday. Another model that has been proposed is the A/B week blended learning model. Half of students across all grades attend school Monday through Thursday 1 week, the other half the following week, and so forth. And again, all students do distance learning on Friday. A third model has been proposed as the looping structure. Younger students may stay with the same teacher for multiple grades and in a smaller cohort. For example, a small group of students will have the same teacher for first and then second grade. And early late staggered schedules is another model that we've all heard about, where grade levels could have staggered start times or an AM/PM rotation to avoid congregating in common spaces. And the state also has asked all school districts to have a plan to close schools again in case of an outbreak on campus. As the classrooms are considering reopening, the state is asking districts to keep distance learning as an option for those students who prefer it. And I guess a survey of parents indicated that there were enough parents who wanted the distance learning to remain as an option. I think that it's very, very difficult and very tough for school districts, as they're being provided many options, but as the discussion has already indicated, with little funding or decrease in funding, and waiting on the feds as well for them to make up their minds as to whether they're going to send the states additional funding for education, so that we will know what the percentage of cuts is going to look like or not, and what needs to be done. Just leaving everything up in the air and pushing school districts to begin opening with so many variables that have not yet been determined is making this very, very challenging, for the state and for the individual school districts. And also, as discussed, many different school districts, have different budgets and have different, different resources to manage all of this. I'm certainly concerned about equity issues in education, which is so important, and how some of the school districts with less resources is going to manage not only creating some sort of model for social distancing its students and staff, but also just providing the supplies that are needed, masks and all the medical supplies that are needed, the digital thermometers, the no-touch thermometers. Those are quite expensive. I believe our health district just checked, I believe they were $67 a piece. So this is at a time when the budget is shrinking for education. This is going to be an expensive process. And of course, the Trump administration is pushing this reopening as quickly as possible because they want workers to be able to get back to work as well. But I'm not sure that there really has been enough of the potential glitches really solved and worked through in order for our state school districts to feel comfortable in doing this. Another issue is that California public schools fear losing millions from lawsuits over masks and infections, as Kathy Rallings mentioned, that COVID-19 has introduced both the new costs as well as threatened funding for schools. And at the same time, there could be, lawsuits both on the one end with families being concerned about their children becoming infected and potentially infecting vulnerable family members, but then parents and families on the other end who are more concerned about, their civil liberties and, and being forced to wear masks and being forced to be mindful of the public health requirements for their children. So there may be far more liability issues raised than we can fully anticipate at this time.
I'd like to make just a very brief comment, getting back to something that Liz and Kathy had said about a lack of leadership. And this is partly true at the state level and definitely true at the federal level. And that leadership does involve funding. There are at least two areas in any economy where the funding needs will always grow. In many areas, increases in productivity and efficiency will lower costs. Healthcare and education are always going to increase as the population goes up. More people means more money. We've not been doing that. Instead, we've been slashing spending so that our per capita spending per student has been collapsing. And we've been misdirecting some of the stuff that does come in, which means we're getting lower and lower outcomes. The US has been collapsing in international standards in our education. California in particular is now near the bottom in its rankings in the country. This makes no sense to me. And it's ultimately down to funding. And better funding would let us make smaller classrooms. This is how we will get better outcomes for the students. We can cut the class sizes down. Instead, they want to cut more money out. To make a reference to something that Liz said about looking for those silver linings in this situation, honestly, if we had better leadership, this would be a fantastic opportunity to rework the way we do education, to cut down those class sizes, to introduce some elements of like distance learning, to also cut down the sizes there and improve the effectiveness. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to slash budgets at the state level and federal level, and you end up worse off. So we really do need better leadership, because there should be no cuts in education, period, ever. This should be something that gets locked in, and it really has a lot to do with thinking long-term about our society. If we're not educating the children of today, they are the adults of tomorrow who will be running everything. This does have an effect on us.
And I just wanted to touch based on something that Kate said at the beginning, when she was saying that there would be an option where some grades would go some days and some grades would go other days. That was option 1 and 2 had those things in it. That's not really an option, though, if you think about it, because there's going to have to be 100% in school for some students, because parents work. They need childcare. Childcare is expensive. You can't afford childcare, like, you know, if there's no before and after school programs and your kid is only going to school 50% of the time, what do you do with them the other 50% of the time? There's like the wages that we make don't even pay for everyday life the way it is. So to add extra expenses onto those families is ridiculous. Like, there has to be better options out there to ensure that, you know, parents can still work and kids have a safe place to go and learn. And then another thing that I was thinking when Kate started, you know, talking about like the masks and the temperature checks, things like this. Well, if a kid has a temperature, where's he going to go? Most schools don't have enough funding to have a school nurse on site. Like, who's going to care for these kids who all of a sudden in the middle of the school day get sick or ill or have a respiratory problem? Like, we need to ensure that our schools all have nurses, you know? So that's something. And then maybe even looking at parents signing a waiver that their kid could be tested for COVID, getting a rapid COVID, you know, test, one that just has a few hours. I know that they're a little bit more expensive, but again, that's where funding comes in. We need more funding to make sure that we are ready and prepared to open up the school and to ensure that we don't have to shut down for a second or a third wave. So, and then the other thing with Kate, with the whole, you know, 50-50 thing is nutrition in school lunches. So when you were saying some kids would go like Monday, Tuesday, and the other kids would go Wednesday, Thursday, great. They can pick up both of their lunches. But if they're doing a Monday through Thursday versus a Monday through Thursday, you can't give the kids a whole week's lunch ahead of time. The lunch is going to go bad by the end of the week. You know, where are they going to get their nutrition from? You know, so there's a lot of things that need to be thought through. And we keep coming back to the fact that the way we can fix these things is with more funding. So we need people who are creative, who can look for new revenue sources, and who can advocate and push to ensure that, you know, our schools are fully funded with additional funding to ensure that our kids can be at school safe this next school year.
So let's go to a related question. So, and we'll start with you, Liz, because you alluded to this question earlier. So for children with learning differences, or who really just need to be in that classroom to absorb some of the knowledge in person, it's just a part of how they learn. How is this, either any of these models, pick any of these models that are being proposed, how is this going to affect children? And is there a plan being considered, or several plans, to help these children continue to be able to learn despite the disruptions?
So again, looking back at what the Cajon Valley School District looked at recently, they do have a 100% option. So for my son, who's on an IEP and struggles with distance learning and needs to be, redirected and put on task again, we're choosing for him to go back 100% of the time for next year. So that's our choice as parents, even though, we do have the ability for him to be home if necessary. But as far as his learning style, like that's going to have to be an option. We can't let, kids who need that, one-on-one attention or need to be in the classroom or who are, people who learn like, with, other means other than videos, to have that opportunity. Now, another thing, though, is, with kids who are on IEPs, the schools actually get paid less for those students as well. The dollar per student is less. So I think as part of the funding that we're looking at, we need to look at that as well to ensure that they count as a full student because, they are a full student.
And Liz, let me just remind you that the models of potential ways to address the social distancing in the schools, that was published by the California Department of Ed. So they are not my ideas. I'm simply listing them so that our public can be aware of some of the possible models that they are pushing out to the school districts to discuss.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not in favor of most of them. And I also am very, very concerned about the students with special needs and, again, how their learning needs would be met, particularly with the type of a model that is, some days on school, some days off. That lack of consistency is certainly going to impact, I think, their learning for the year. So those are all definite concerns that I have as well. And the fact that I think that our schools need consistent guidance. Currently, as we mentioned earlier, they are looking at guidance from public health, from the California Department of Ed, and then from the state government. And that's where so much of this confusion is coming forward with, okay, which way do we go here? Who do we need to listen to, and how do we collaborate and blend this guidance into some sort of decision making that makes sense? And then again, are we going to be receiving the federal funds in order to maintain our budgets for this coming school year? So there are just so many questions up in the air. And such a push to move forward quickly that it's putting, of course, great stress on all of the educational institutions in our state. I also just want to mention that I see that Georgine Tomasi is here with us, and I'd like to give her an opportunity to speak as well.
Absolutely. Welcome, Georgine. If you want to, please just give us a little bit of just a few remarks. We'd love to hear from you, and then we'd love to hear from you on some of these questions.
Let me see, I'll unmute myself. Good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm zoomed out at this point. I've been to all these Zoom meetings today, so I apologize. I apologize for coming in late, but I was at the North Area Caucus and it was an important endorsement meeting, so that's why I was there. Just a brief outline. We've been working for about the last month to put a plan together for the school district in which I'm a board member, the Escondido Union School District. We have 2 school districts in Escondido. We have a high school district and then an elementary. I'm seated on the elementary. And it's been quite a humbling process for me. I've been in education for 40 years, but I've never been entrenched in something this monumental. And I've been in a lot of things, but so many things to consider. And we're all kind of all the stakeholders in our community have been called on to be part of putting this plan together. We have about 60 people, parents, administrators, both unions represented, the classified and the certificated staff, and parents, of course, trying to put something together that kind of makes sense for us, and that our main concern, and my main concern too, and it's everyone else on this committee, is how are we going to do this safely for all of our kids? That's number one. How are they going to come in there and be educated, and that we're not going to be the next meatpacking plant situation, or the next nursing home? And not impossibilities. I said, especially if you're in a classroom all day with students. We are going to be offering hybrid models, distance learning, and many of our teachers and many of our students really can't be around other people. They really have compromised immune systems. So that's another factor to consider. Many of our teachers have kids, and if they're going to do a hybrid model, and how the heck are they going to do that? One of my biggest concern is, how are they going to, where are they going to go with kids, and their kids are in school or maybe not in school, and they have, how are they going to teach there if their child's school isn't full time, isn't even half time, or it might be distance learning. So being in this group, why I said it humbled me, there's just so many things which it appears like many of you have brought up that have to be considered. But our main thing was the safety of our kids and of our employees. That's kind of the umbrella of our decision making. If it's not safe, we're not going to do it. We're looking at, they figured out the number of kids in a classroom where it would be safe, and I think we're doing about 12 in middle school and about 9 in elementary, and 9 per class. And I know everybody is anxious, and especially me. There's especially special ed kids, going 2 days on, 2 days off, 1 day on, 1 day off is mind-boggling. But so those are some of the things that we're trying to grapple with. What do you do with that? What do you do with this population? But again, the umbrella for us is the safety of kids. We're not doing anything that's going to jeopardize our kids, and that's not based on science. It has to be based on science. We are, incorporating all the CDC and the CDE, all the parameters that they're putting out. So it's not an easy process. It really isn't. And we've learned you ain't going to please everybody. People are going to be upset. I want everybody's kids to be back to normal. But until we get that vaccine, and until we have firm proof that, hey, we can congregate again, we can have more than, we can have people in the, a number of people in the classroom, it's not going to happen. So I try not to think of that, and try to think of, especially on this committee here that I'm working on, that, we have to make this the new normal, and make it as safe as possibly for the students and the employees that are in our district. Sorry for going on so long.
No,
thank you.
Incredibly appreciated. So let's talk about something that you touched on that is critical, and I know I've known a great many children in this category. Children who are immunocompromised, unable to be in certain situations in the classroom. Are there some plans besides just having them stay 100% distance learning that are in the works? More intensive cleaning, heaven forbid, some more healthcare, maybe nurses that are available. Is there something? Because the plans have never been great for immunocompromised children anyway, but is there anything out there that they're considering?
At this point, we're not, one of the things that the state never did was makes nurses mandatory. Really would have helped.
Mhm.
And so the first thing that got cut for the last 20 years since I've been in this state, cut the nurses, give them more people. So, that's an issue. Are we going to institute those? We have a lot of kids in our district that are medically challenged. These are really really very important conversations that we're going to have. How are we going to do this? Sorry, just.
I
I was
agree.
going to say, I'm sorry. I was just going to say as well that not only immunocompromised, but also special education is definitely going to be challenging. And one of the things that I'm hoping Liam will jump in on this piece as well is that special education is funded through the federal government. And there's lots of different mandates that say you have to do this, that, and the other thing with special education, yet they only provide 17% of the funding in order to meet their mandate. And there is a bill in Congress that has been introduced that would actually just fund the things they say that they want us to do, that meet their current commitments. That would actually help with some of the special education pieces. Another part is within the CDE guidelines, which is in the chat. So anybody who wants to look at it can take a look at the entire guidance. It talks about staff should wear masks and students are encouraged to wear masks. But it's important to realize that the wearing of a mask isn't protecting you, it's protecting other people. So students that's immunocompromised, everyone would have to wear a mask around that individual and that individual student. And so there's a big debate right now, even after the governor mandated that everyone in public wears masks. On the flip side, there was an exemption for schools. So, and there's lots of parents that don't want their kids to wear masks if they go to school, but those immunocompromised students and some of the students that need that protection requires cooperation from all the other student body and staff. And also, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that we have lots of staff, lots of teachers that would need to have every student wearing a mask and social distance in order to actually be safe according to the CDC guidelines. So again, it's a very complicated issue, but we need cooperation from everybody in that school and everybody in the district in order to make it work and to actually create create the safety that is necessary.
It honestly bothers me that we allow people to pitch things in terms of their rights or their freedom. It's my right not to wear a mask or something, when it's not about them at all. It's literally about hurting other people. All you're doing is saying, please don't hurt other people. Is it your right to drive 150 miles an hour shooting guns into the air? No, it's not. It's clearly unsafe. It hurts other people. We've instituted laws in order to make everyone a little bit safer. I mean, you don't have a right to run red lights. The wearing of masks is trying to help other people. And honestly, I'm worried about it, not just for the kids, but honestly for a lot of the faculty, especially given that we have a lot of older people teaching. This is a severe risk for them. I know I have severe asthma. I'm a little worried about going back. One of my campuses is going to be on campus in the coming semester, which means I'm going to be exposed to people. And with something like 40% or so of people are asymptomatic carriers of it. Someone can feel perfectly fine, cough on me because they're not wearing a mask, and then I have the consequences. If we had some kind of serious guidelines pushed down here in order to guarantee all of our safety, it would really help.
So I have a question, a question of the question. So would it be possible, because, masks aren't going to be required and as the school decides on their own, but could it be possible to, put the kids in what they've been calling cohorts, kids and families who want to wear masks and kids and families who don't want to wear masks, and pair up the teachers with the same philosophy of thinking? I'm just wondering, because I personally wouldn't want my child to be around non-mask wearers, but there's a lot of parents who don't want their kids to wear masks. So, I mean, is there, possibility of building the classrooms around those who wear masks and those who don't wear masks?
I
Let's
think
not forget, as a part of that question, that yes, you can transmit to other people through breathing and not wearing a mask, but you can receive and catch COVID through your eyes.
Mhm.
Yes.
So that's a critical step to consider.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add, there's a whole nother layer to this, and then I'll go back to the issue about the specialized classrooms, Liz, but in terms of immunocompromised students. But if the parents are back at work, then the parents and family members are also being exposed and coming back home to those immunocompromised children. So, as a public health professional, we're looking at that too, and that adds a whole nother layer of risk to this reopening. But when I worked with special ed students and families for many years, some time ago, it's been a while, but we had students at that time, of course, pre-pandemic era, who were immunocompromised or had other medical conditions. And so they were placed on IEPs, and it was called being on home hospital. And at that time, we sent the necessary staff to them for tutoring and specialized services. We sent our behavioral health clinicians and speech therapists, and that's how they received their services on their IEPs. And then when there were immunocompromising issues or conditions, we already had to implement the distance services and using telehealth and those types of services for those students, because even if we brought them onto campus and we separated them into a classroom where other students had health conditions and there was going to be extra caution, it's just so difficult to ensure cooperation of the populations and ensure that there isn't going to be exposure either accidentally or due to lack of cooperation. And then you have school districts at risk of liability again. So anyway, it's complex.
And Liz, I would suggest that it's possible, and I think school districts are looking at that. One of the things that I brought up in our school board meeting last week or a few weeks ago is that if you have this, some students are going to wear masks, some students aren't, then is there a bullying situation that goes on? It's like, why are you wearing a mask? And are there going to be behavioral issues that go along with that, that teachers have to deal with instead of teaching students, right? But I do think it's possible. I think potentially shields rather than the cloth face coverings might be more expensive. Again, we need funding for that, but that could be a better way to go because you can see the face, and like you were saying, it covers the eyes, so those are some things that might be possible. But you would really have to have that complete separation from folks wearing masks and folks not, and then I think you would have to have some type of a waiver of liability or some type of liability protection for those opting not to wear masks, because again, students are not at school 24/7, so they're going home, they're going into other environments, and then they're bringing back potentially pieces. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but today the National Baseball League, MLB, they shut down their spring training because there were 5 people that are COVID positive. So, and they've only been open about a week. So these are healthy people doing athletics. So that's a whole nother piece of that you have to look at as far as athletics in schools. And that's something that parents want to see moving forward as well.
I think a great comment to have raised too, especially given the prevalence of all the people like claiming this is a hoax, there's nothing to it, and people thinking that there's nothing really there. So they want their right to do whatever they want and leave their masks off. So if we don't find a way to segregate that, then you have that increased risk of exposure. I would be worried that some nutter would file a lawsuit on equal protection grounds that my kid should have a right to sit in a classroom with other people and spread his germs around. And it really just gets back to us not thinking in scientific terms about actually minimizing risk. So yeah, we've got a serious problem of lack of leadership here. And without that, a lot of these ad hoc policies are not really going to be able to address the core questions.
It's upsetting to me that we're still, that we don't, I mean, when you're sitting in a classroom, even a half a day, those molecules stay in the air all day, so, we're still giving the message. And I mean, California is a pretty progressive state. And, we're lucky that we have Gavin Newsom and that he's, required all this stuff. But think about this. Are we telling people, well, that it sends a message to parents. It sends a message to everyone. Well, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. Your kid can sit all day and half a day or whatever the day is without a mask. And lo and behold, how about the teacher? And well, they're young. They can't get it. Well, kids can get it. It's been proven. Kids have had it. Kids have died from this. So it really upsets me that we make this standard. Everyone in a closed space needs to. You have one set rule and everyone's got to follow it. We shouldn't be second guessing whether we wear it or we don't wear it.
So we're going to go to one last thing, but just at the end of that, I want to note that when we talk about not having these extra resources we need for these children to be able to be in the classroom in some fashion, that creates, if we realize that without putting the money and all of the thought that our panelists are talking about, that puts us in real danger of having even more problems with segregation in our classrooms and among the learning of our children. So we really need to think when they talk about the funding about what that's going to look like. So the last question today we're going to talk about it's related to all of this, but it's something that we don't normally attach to conversations about school. We consider it to be a separate conversation. But so we have a number of these items that you've all touched on. Georgine just talked about involving the teachers and the classifieds, and of course, Catherine here is we have incredible knowledge here from the teacher end, from every single angle. But I want you just briefly to touch on what it takes as far as working with the teachers and the classifieds and negotiation in order to get these changes into the classroom. I think people tend to treat them as separate issues and think that teachers are just trying to become millionaires, and that's not true.
No, it isn't. I can tell you that. And it's been it's been positive with the relationship that the district has had with the teachers, with the classified, and they're willing to listen to things and willing to negotiate other alternatives. That makes sense. That makes sense to their, to their bargaining unit, to kids that they teach. And so it has not been contentious at all. It's been, it's been a work in progress. There's going to be, niches, but teachers and the support personnel that we have are, they're listening to each other, which is really a big piece of negotiations. Both sides are trying to really kind of listen so that they can come to something that's amenable, workable, and safe for everybody in their population.
I would agree that in normal times, there might be some disagreements between labor and management. But I have to say that these negotiations have been some of the most difficult negotiations that I think I've encountered. But in the long run, I have seen, for the most part, school districts and their labor partners have found ways. I mean, just think about it. I mean, in this state, teachers, administrators were able to turn on a dime and move to distance learning within a week without any real training, without any of the pieces. And yes, it wasn't ideal, but they were able to make it work, and really able to find ways to celebrate their graduates, find ways to connect, even if it meant knocking on the door of a student that they hadn't heard from for a few weeks. So I think the partnership will take us far into the future, but that partnership needs to be met with leadership at the state and federal level when it comes to funding. I mean, both sides, when you talk about labor management, both sides are lobbying for no cuts to education in the state budget, federal dollars to come in as soon as possible, and then ongoing funding to make sure that our schools can educate the students for the future.
So now we're going to do some short closing statements. The order we're going to go in, we're going to start with Liam and then Liz, and then we're going to go to Kate, Georgine, and Kathleen will have the last word.
Yeah, so I'll just thank our guests for coming along and sharing their insights here. We have a complicated process here to reopen all of our schools. I know the three campuses that I teach on at college level are all doing things very, very differently. So this is still a very confusing time. We have a lot of uncertainties, and we're going to have to be willing to work together to talk about these issues and to try and find good solutions. And we really need better leadership at the state and the federal level here. So if you're at all concerned about your child's education, you have a right to be. We can do better, and that starts with our votes. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, again, Liz Lavertu for State Assembly in the 71st Assembly District. First, I just wanted to mention Daryl on Facebook. Yes, you are right. People have throughout the COVID been picking up school lunches. If you want to watch our school lunch program that we did a few weeks back, school lunches run a little bit differently, and they have to balance their budget completely. And one difficulty with that, and why we'll need more funding for it, is when you package up lunches, it costs more money. So we need to make sure that the federal government is giving us extra money for school lunches. And then thank you to Tisa and Edison, as always, who are behind the scenes or in front of the camera helping us out each week. I appreciate that. And to our two guests, Kathy and Georgine, thank you so much for joining us. I want to just put one thing out there. We really focused around K through 12. Didn't touch much on colleges and universities going forward. And I know that some will be on campus, some will be 100% distance learning. Those of you who are going to college or are in college, definitely think about continuing on this year, even though it's going to be a little bit different. Students who take an unplanned gap year are less likely to return to complete their education. So even though it might be a little bit different, it might not feel comfortable, stick with it. You'll have great stories to tell your kids and grandkids in the future. And then on a final note, happy Father's Day to all of the fathers out there. And thanks for everything you do for your kids and for our community. Thank you.
And Kate.
Thank you. And yes, I want to echo Liz and say thank you so much to our technical team, to our guests who have joined us today with their expertise, and our volunteers such as Catherine, who are consistently here helping us to create these town hall programs for all of you. I also would like to echo the theme that that Dr. O'Meara emphasized, which is our need for strong leadership, both at the national and at the state level. We have an education committee member, Assemblywoman Christy Smith from Santa Clarita, and she noted on this issue that advisory as opposed to mandatory language is atypical for education. Where state officials usually enforce prescriptive protocols for everything from playground equipment to cleaning products. And while top education and public health officials signaled a commitment to consistency on the pandemic policies and reopening, they fell so far short of the uniform policies that they had promised. Instead, our state superintendent stated that school districts should plan for their unique circumstances while the state creates recommendations based on the best available scientific evidence. Well, I think we need our state government, our legislators, and our executive aspect of our state government, obviously the governor's office, as well as our public health officials at the state level, as well as our Department of Education, to all come together and develop uniform policies that are mandatory, that are going to guide our school districts in this reopening. And this would cut short so much of this confusion, fear, anxiety, uncertainty that we're all facing regarding this reopening issue this fall. So I would plead with, again, our state government, our State Department of Public Health, as well as our state public education office, to please come together and determine these policies for us ahead of time, rather than having us on regional and local levels trying to navigate this very, very challenging time. Thank you.
All right, Georgine.
Yes, I can concur with Kate. I think we really need something a little bit stronger than just recommendations. And I'm seeing that in the planning process that we're going through at our school district. Even though we're, doing a lot of things, there's not enough policy, and also after the policy, are they going to enforce this? Is this going to be something that we're all going to oversee, that we're all going to comply with? Just a little thing. We have a very, high concentration in supplemental grant district. And throughout this whole process, throughout the closings of our schools starting March, I think we fed probably have served about 20,000 meals per week. And we will be continuing to do that throughout, whatever our plan becomes as far as hybrid plan, in school, total distance learning. We will be continuing doing that. And how we've served all these meals on a weekly basis is that we have sites. We have about 10 sites, and parents come and pick up the meals. And especially on weekends, many of our kids, if they didn't have that, would have not had any food. So it's a big consideration through this whole process. Many of our kids don't have, food security. And so that's another part of this whole planning process, to make sure too that we continue those things that keep our kids, healthy and alive, along with following the science. But we want to make sure that they don't, starve throughout this whole process. I concur with everybody here. I think we're in the same line. We need a stronger voice from Sacramento at this point, saying, hey, this is, give us some guidance, give us some parameters, this is what you all have to do. And it has to be consistent throughout the state. We're trying to do that with the schools that we have charge of. And so that, that there is a policy for all of our schools. But let's coordinate that with the state, which I don't think they're doing at this point. And from, what everyone said here and some of the things that you would like to see the state doing. The federal government, I've kind of given up on. I really have. I said, I'm not putting this on them because you know what? I'll just get a lot of angst on something that's not going to happen. I don't expect it. I feel sad about the whole thing, but it ain't going to happen. And so that's where they are. But the state, and then the state that we live in, I think we need that. We need a little stronger support from Sacramento. So in closing, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. And I appreciate being part of this group here. It was good. It was enlightening for myself too.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. The last word for today is going to go to Kathleen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me as well. I'm not quite as pessimistic as my colleague Georgine. So I know a lot of what we talked about falls on funding, and so I'm going to ask that the audience really consider the HEROES Act. Everything within the state budget right now is contingent upon getting federal money, and the HEROES Act does do a lot of, fills in a lot of those gaps that our state budget is lacking. So please, if you know people in other states, to get their senators to put pressure on Mitch McConnell to bring the HEROES Act before the Senate, that would be fantastic. This week, we do anticipate that the governor and the Assembly and the Senate to get together and come up with a state budget. So we really need folks to contact the governor's office and the legislature's office to keep those cuts away from our classroom and to actually bring additional funding. There's a lot of talk right now of reprioritizing city budgets, county budgets, and to increase funding towards education. And I think now would be the time to seriously consider that as far as feeding our students and the other aspects that we've talked about today. In the long term, we do have a proposition on the ballot that would bring in billions of dollars to schools, and that's schools and communities first. It is on the November ballot, and it would bring in about $12 billion a year to our counties, and then education would get about $4 billion of that. So I would highly encourage folks to look into that proposition and to vote for it and get their family and friends to vote for it as well. And then lastly, as far as funding is concerned, we do need to look at a potential wealth tax in this state. We might not be able to do it in the federal level, but we do have an opportunity to do it here. There are a lot of people in this state that are making a lot of money during this pandemic, and that maybe those dollars need to be taxed in order to generate the funds that we need to support those that are less fortunate, and especially our students in education. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to a continued dialogue around this topic, and hopefully everyone will take action in the next week or so in order to secure funding in our education. Thank you.
So that's our program for today, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us as always. Next week, we'll be talking about cannabis and the war on drugs. We have a couple of very special guests. We have Hezekiah Allen, Lanny Swerdlow, and Edison Gomez-Kraus. Please come back and join us. Until then, stay safe. Have a fantastic Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and to all the people who love their fathers and are looking forward to celebrating with, for, and around them, and to all the mothers who are fathers as well. Thank you, and have a great week.